With Dragonflight bringing a major overhaul to many professions, we figured now would be a good time to look at the major changes that the Herbalism profession has undergone over the years. First, let's briefly discuss the topic of resource nodes. While not specific to the Herbalism profession, resource nodes deserve to be discussed in their own right before going deeper into Herbalism's past. These resource nodes are sometimes called profession nodes, meaning that they can be looted by gathering or harvesting, which in turn yields raw ingredients usable by the player in many different professions. Any player in WoW which has been out in the open world has seen the ubiquitous resource nodes of mining deposit and herbs. Technically, there are 7 different types of profession nodes, the first of which are mining nodes that yield ores and stones. Mildly interesting fact is that technically only mining nodes have proper names, and the correct names for mining nodes are either veins or deposits. The next profession node is from Herbalism, and these interactable objects are simply called herbs. The final resource node, which can be tracked on the minimap, are fishing schools. The next 2 resource nodes are a little bit more abstract. The first of these is skinning, since any mob that dies, which is skinnable, technically becomes a resource node upon its death. The second of these resource nodes is any body of water, since fish can be caught in any part of the water, and not only in fishing schools. The final 2 resource nodes are a little bit more obscure. The first of these are the gas clouds, which were in several expansions, mainly the Burning Crusade, Wrath, and Cataclysm. These resource nodes can only be looted by engineers with special goggles. When looted, these clouds give the player elemental crafting ingredients. For example, looting windy clouds in Grand and Outland would grant the player motes of air. The final resource node is more of a technicality because it comes from questing. Every time a quest has the player acquire an item by clicking on it, they are technically looting a resource node, since it's an interactable item in the open world which puts items in the player's inventories. Now that we know what exactly a resource node is, we can talk about their history. The first big change to resource nodes came in Cataclysm, which saw the first introduction of gaining experience by gathering herbs and mining ores. The next 2 major changes to resource nodes came in Warlords of Draenor. First, the hard skill requirements were removed to harvesting resource nodes, and the yields from gathering nodes became determined solely by the player's profession skill level. This essentially meant you could no longer fail at gathering items, just instead receive no loot from the node. This second and much more important change was the mining and herbalism nodes were no longer able to be looted by multiple people at once. This was presumably done to curtail rapid gold inflation in Warlords of Draenor, as well as discourage bot farmers. The only problem with the system is that if someone has already looted a node in the past minute, it can still visibly appear on a player's client. And then when they go and loot the node, it just disappears and the player is sad and confused. Now we can move on to the main topic of the video. Herbalism is one of the few professions in WoW to have received very little changes in its entire lifetime. One of the more unique things about the Herbalism profession is that it is the only profession in the game which grants temporary buffs or effects to players when they pick certain types of herbs or use herbs items that they've gathered. Prior to Warlords of Draenor, Herbalism granted the Lifeblood ability, which provided a small amount of healing and increased the haste that could last up to 20 seconds and had a 2-minute cooldown. However, this was not a unique ability in the sense skinning and mining had similar abilities but with different stats from haste, such as stamina in the case of mining. All of these profession abilities, including Lifeblood, were removed in the beginning of Warlords of Draenor. Overall, there are a total of 8 of these herbs and herb items in the game which have special uses. The first 5 Herbalism items can be looted alongside herbs. The first item is called a Fell Blossom, which can occasionally be looted from Fellweed across all of Outland. When used, the Fell Blossom grants the player a buff which absorbs a small amount of damage over 15 seconds. This effect is similar to a Priest Power Word Shield ability, and the Fell Blossom also shares a cooldown with the Warlock's Hellstone. The next herb is a rare spawn of Ragvale and Zangarmarsh called Flame Cap. Using this item gives the player a 1-minute buff to their critical strike and fire spell power. Interestingly, Flame Cap is only consumable, and has no use in any crafting ingredients. Multiple Flame Cap buffs can be collected, but they all share a cooldown of 3 minutes. The third herb from the Burning Crusade is called Blood Thistle, and can only be found in Eversong Woods. Only Blood Elves can use Blood Thistle, and it is apparently addictive in the game, with abusers being called Thistleheads. When used, it gives the player a small buff to spell power for 10 minutes. However, upon expiration, the player receives a debuff called Blood Thistle Withdrawal, which decreases the player's intellect by 5 and lasts for 20 minutes. The next herb item is called a Life-Giving Seed and can occasionally be found inside herb nodes and cataclysm zones. This item doesn't apply a buff to the player, but rather is a fun, unused toy item which stuns the player and turns them into an herb until the effect is cancelled. The 5th and 6th herb items are called Life Spirit and the Water Spirit, and both can occasionally be looted from herbs in Mist of Pandaria zones. Both items have a 5-minute cooldown, with the Life Spirit healing the player a little and the Water Spirit restoring a little bit of mana. The last 2 herbs give a buff directly to the player when they're looted and do not need to be used to activate their effects. Dreaming Glory is an Outland herb which when picked up gives a regeneration buff of 42 health every 5 seconds for 15 minutes at max level. The last herb is from Mist of Pandaria and called Golden Lotus. When picked up, it gives the player the Luck of the Lotus buff, which allows the herbalist a chance to find additional treasures on creatures killed for 15 minutes. Now let's move on to bonuses. Skill bonuses boost a player's skill and professions, allowing them to gather more resources and higher quality herbs. Tauren are the only race in the game to gain an Herbalism boost with their racial ability. This takes form in the passive talent called Cultivation. whose flavor text reads, Herbalism skill increased by 15, and you gather herbs faster than normal herbalists. Of course, this skill means that Tauren players still need to train in the Herbalism skill, but this Tauren racial is very handy, especially when it's combined with the Druid's flight form, since harvesting herbs in the flight form does not remove the Druid's form. This allows for Tauren Druid players to quickly gather herbs and is one of the best ways to farm herbs in the entire game. Cultivation was one of the longest lasting unchanged skills in the game until Dragonflight, where its bonus was reduced from 15 to 5, and they added a key term for gathering faster called Deftness, which cultivation now increases by 25%. There are currently 3 pieces of gear and 1 tool that can boost a player's skill in Herbalism. The first item is the Herbalist Gloves, which are from vanilla and give a +5 bonus to classic Herbalism. However, the pattern is only available to Alliance players and is bought from an NPC in Ashenvale named Harlow Darkweed. It is not that this is an Alliance-only recipe because the bonus the gloves provide can stack on top of the Tauren's cultivation ability, which would give Horde players an unfair advantage in Herbalism. The Herbalist Gloves are also leather armor, meaning only druids, rogues, demon hunters, and monks can use them. The next piece is another set of gloves, this time from Mista Pandaria, named Forager's Gloves. These gloves allow for faster gathering of all resources in Pandaria, not just herbs. However, these gloves only work in Pandaria and are cloth gear, meaning pretty much anyone can wear them. The next item is also from Mista Pandaria and is called the Mist Piercing Goggles. These equipable goggles allow players to see additional herbs while in Pandaria. Although they do not need to be equipped to work, they do only work in Pandaria, and they also require mop engineering to make. Luckily, engineers can sell Mist Piercing Goggles on the auction house, so everyone can buy one. The final item that can boost a player's Herbalism skill once again comes from Mista Pandaria. This time, however, it's an equipable tool item rather than a piece of gear, which increases the player's Herbalism skill by 10. This item is named the Herbalism Spade, which can be bought from any number of trade vendors throughout Pandaria. Like many other profession items in MoP, the Spade does not need to be equipped to give the bonus stat. There are 3 enchants in the game which can also increase the player's Herbalism skill level. The first 2 enchants come from Classic, where the Herbalism enchant gives a +2 bonus to Herbalism, and the Advanced Herbalism enchant gives a +5 bonus to Herbalism. The third and final enchant comes from Wrath of the Lich King, and is called the Gatherer enchant. This enchant gives a +5 bonus to several professions, including Herbalism, Mining, and Skinning. Although Dragonflight brings a new reagent bag, which will likely replace many profession-specific bags, we should still look at the history of herb bags. Throughout WoW's life, there have only been 7 herb bags in the entire game, with the last one being added in Cataclysm. Classic had 3 Herbalism bags. The first of these herb bags is a 12-slot herb pouch, which can be bought from vendors in major vanilla cities for 10 silver. The next 2 herb bags are made from tailoring patterns, which are reputation awards that can be bought from the Cenarian Circle. The second bag is called the Cenarian Herb Bag, which has 20 slots and is a pattern sold by Mishta and Silthus for 1 gold and 80 silver once the players reach friendly reputation with the Cenarian Circle faction. To create a Cenarian Herb Bag, a tailor needs 5 bolts of rune cloth, 10 of the hard-to-find purple lotus, and 1 rune thread. The final herb bag from Classic is the Satchel of Sonaris, which is also sold by Mishta. The Satchel of Sonaris has 24 slots, costs 4 gold and 50 silver, and the player must be revered with the Cenarian Circle to learn the pattern. The crafting ingredients for the Satchel of Sonaris are 6 bolts of rune cloth, 2 moon cloth, 1 black lotus, and 4 iron web spider silk. The Burning Crusade saw only 1 new herb bag called Myken's Botanical Bag, which has 28 slots and was added in patch 2.4.3. The bag's tailoring pattern was a reward from the Sporgar and Zangarmarsh after the players revered with the faction, and the pattern itself cost 25 of the infamous glow caps. This tailoring pattern requires 4 primal mooncloth and 2 fel lotus to create Myken's Botanical Bag. Wrath also saw 1 herb bag added to the game, named the Emerald Bag. This 32-slot bag was added in patch 3.1, and the tailoring pattern to make it could be bought from Kalawak when the player reached revered with the Tuskar faction for a price of 4 gold. The ingredients needed to craft the Emerald Bag are 4 Moonshroud and 6 Frost Lotus. Cataclysm was the last expansion to add herb bags to the game, and it added 2 more of them. The first bag was given the lengthy name, Carriage Going Green Herb Tote Bag. This bag can only be bought by Alliance players, as the only NPC who sold it was located in Stormwind. Her name is Dawn Radu, and the bag has 20 slots which a player could buy for a price of 28 gold. The last herb bag to be added to the game is called the Hyjal Expedition Bag. With a total of 36 slots, it is the largest herb bag in the game. The bag's pattern is taught by the Cataclysm training vendors, and the ingredients require 20 bolts of Ember Silk Cloth and 40 Volatile Life. And speaking of Volatile Life, herb gathering is a good source for life elemental ingredients. The theme was carried for 3 expansions, the Burning Crusade, Wrath, and Cataclysm. Inside herb nobes in the Burning Crusade zones, players could find motes of life. And 10 of these motes could be used to create a Primal Life, which was an uncommon crafting ingredient. The same design and system was used in Wrath of the Lich King, where 10 crystallized life created an Eternal Life, and in Cataclysm, where Volatile Life could be collected in herb nodes. And before we move on to some statistical analysis, here are some fun bits of Herbalism trivia. Herbalism was originally the only gathering profession that did not require a special tool to collect materials, like how a mining pig is needed to collect ore. The one exception to this rule was the Blood Scythe weapon, which was needed to gather Bloodvine and Zul'Gurub before Cataclysm. There are only 2 herbs to have been removed from the game. The first is the aforementioned Bloodvine herb from Zul'Gurub, which was removed with the Cataclysm update. The second herb is more of a technicality. Its name was Chameleon Lotus, and it never made out of the Warlords of Draenor beta. Although there can be slight variations on your definition of what an herb is in WoW, from vanilla to Dragonflight Alpha, there have been 96 herbs in total. The definition of herbs we mean are herbs you can only pick in the open world, and herbs that are whole and completed when picked, so no counting petals, seeds, or other herb items you can obtain when gathering. Classic saw 32 herbs in the game, with all of them being common items except for the 2 uncommon herbs of Bloodvine and Black Lotus. TBC added 10 herbs to the game, with the Fel Lotus being the only uncommon one. Wrath had 9 herbs, with the uncommon herb being the Frost Lotus. Kata introduced 6 new common quality herbs. Mop had 7 herbs, with the uncommon herb being called Golden Lotus. Warlords of Draenor had 6 common quality herbs added, just like Cataclysm did. Legion saw 7 new herbs added, with the uncommon herb being Felwort. BFA had 8 herbs added, with the uncommon herb being Anchorweed. Shadowlands added another 7 herbs, 5 common quality herbs, 1 uncommon quality herb in the case of Nightshade, and 1 rare quality herb in the case of First Flower and Zareth Mortis. So far with Dragonflight, we have 1 uncommon herb with Hochin Bloom and 3 uncommon with Saxifrage, Bubble Poppy, and Wraithbark. Ignoring Classic and how it heavily skews data, we can see each expansion has at most added 10 herbs, and at least 6. The number 7 is the median, being the number of herbs added in Mists of Pandaria, Legion, and Shadowlands. Also, since herbs are usually added each patch, and assuming Dragonflight has 3 major patches, that would be a total of Dragonflight with 7 herbs as well. Assuming Dragonflight has 7 herbs by its end and ignoring Classic, the average number of herbs added by expansions is 6.7 herbs, which would round up to 7 anyway. From an item quality perspective, the vast majority of herbs in the game are common, with the minority being the 9 uncommon and the 1 rare herb. The First Flower is notable as being the only rare quality herb in the entire game at this point. The biggest changes coming to Herbalism at Dragonflight is the introduction of tiered reagents. This idea is not completely new to WoW, as something similar called Herbalism techniques were implemented in Legion and BFA. These techniques saw the player do a quest or have a chance upon gathering herbs to increase the rank of the player's ability to gather a specific herb. Increasing the rank from rank 1 to rank 2 to rank 3 of the gathering ability of a certain herb usually resulted in better yields or an increased chance to find other mats when gathering. Dragonflight seems to be doing something similar, but instead of gathering ability itself being ranked, the reagents themselves are now split into 5 tiers of different reagents. They can roughly be thought of in terms of gear color. That is, a rank 1 reagent is equivalent to a common white item. A rank 2 reagent is an uncommon green item. A rank 3 reagent is a blue rare item. A rank 4 reagent is a purple epic item. And a rank 5 reagent is an orange legendary item. Dragonflight brings back the elemental aspects of crafting in the sense that herbs can now have the Dragonflight special affix: Frigid, Windswept, Decayed, Infurious, Titan Touched, and Lush. Alright, and this video was originally going to also cover mining and the skinning professions, but it slowly grew longer and longer to the point where we decided to make it its own video. Since mining and skinning have much less to discuss than Herbalism does, we'll probably combine them into a single video to be released sometimes in the future, or maybe not. Thanks for planting yourself down and watching this video. Hope you were able to gather some information about the history of herbs and Herbalism, and see you in the next one.